The night was silent, but heaven was not. A storm was coming, not of wind, but of destiny. Every shadow in Jerusalem trembled, for the hour had arrived. A man who healed the sick, raised the dead, and forgave the sinner, was now walking toward his own suffering. This was not the beginning of defeat. It was the beginning of victory written in blood. The light of the world was about to face the deepest darkness. And yet, even in that darkness, love would not die. The air in Jerusalem was thick that night, filled with whispers, fear, and the scent of rain. The city slept under a heavy sky, unaware that history was turning its final page. Jesus sat with his closest friends, sharing bread for what would be the last time before the storm. His voice was calm, but his eyes carried the weight of eternity. "This is my body, broken for you," he said, and silence fell around the table. The disciples did not fully understand, but their hearts ached with a strange sorrow. Across the table, Judas looked down, avoiding the gaze of his teacher. The silver coins in his pocket felt heavier with every heartbeat. Betrayal had a sound, the faint clinking of metal against his robe. Jesus turned to him softly, without anger. "What you are about to do? Do quickly." Those words cut through the night like a blade. Judas stood, his steps echoing in the darkness as he left the room, the first shadow in a night that would never be forgotten. Outside, the wind began to rise. The olive trees swayed in Gethsemane as Jesus walked ahead, his disciples trailing behind, tired and afraid. He fell to his knees, praying alone. His whisper trembled in the night. "Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Yet not my will, but yours be done." Drops of sweat fell like blood to the ground. Heaven watched in silence. Angels held their breath. Then, footsteps. The sound of soldiers. Torches flickered through the trees. Judas appeared once more, his face pale, eyes cold with regret and fear. He kissed Jesus on the cheek. A sign of love turned into betrayal. "Rabbi," he said. The guard stepped forward, seizing the man who spoke life into the world. Peter drew his sword, his heart burning with confusion and anger. But Jesus raised his hand, calm and steady. "Put your sword away. Shall I not drink the cup my Father has given me?" The disciples scattered into the darkness, their hope shaken, their courage broken. Chains bound the hands that had healed the blind. The Savior of the world was led away under the cover of night, not as a conqueror, but as a prisoner. Yet even in those moments of fear, a quiet strength filled the air. Something greater was unfolding, something eternal. And as the torches faded into the distance, the garden fell silent once more. Only the whisper of the wind remained, carrying the echo of a prayer that would soon change all of creation. The night bled into morning, and the city began to stir. The streets whispered of something terrible. A man called Jesus had been taken. The same hands that once blessed children and lifted the broken were now tied with rough rope. The guards pushed him through narrow alleys toward the high priest's house. Their torches flickered against stone walls, casting long, trembling shadows, as if the world itself feared what was coming. Inside, a crowd had already gathered. Priests, elders, and men hungry for accusation. The room was thick with smoke from burning lamps, and the air stank of pride. False witnesses shouted over each other, each voice louder, crueler, desperate to twist truth into lies. "He claims to destroy the temple," one shouted. "He says he is the Son of God," cried another. But Jesus stood in silence. No defense, no anger, only peace. The truth did not need to shout. It simply stood. Caiaphas, the high priest, leaned forward, his voice sharp as a blade. "Tell us, are you the Messiah?" The room fell still. Every heartbeat waited. Jesus raised his head and spoke quietly, "I am." And with those two words, the world trembled. The high priest tore his robe, screaming, "Blasphemy!" The crowd erupted, fists pounding tables, voices roaring like thunder. They spat on him, struck him, mocked him. The Son of God stood covered in the hate of the very people he came to save. Yet his eyes were steady, not of anger, but of love that would not turn away. Outside, near the courtyard fire, another battle was taking place. Not of swords, but of the heart. Peter stood among the servants, his face half lit by the fire's glow. Fear crawled inside him. A woman looked at him closely. "You were with Jesus of Nazareth." Peter's chest tightened. The words burst out before he could stop them. "I don't know him." Another man spoke. "You're one of his followers." Again Peter shook his head. "No, I am not." The third time came like a knife. "Surely you were with him. Your accent gives you away." Peter's heart broke. "I swear to you, I don't know that man." And then, the sound that pierced the night. A rooster crowed. Peter froze. The memory hit him like fire. "Before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times." His eyes filled with tears. He turned toward the courtyard. And through the open doorway, Jesus looked at him. Just one look. No anger, no blame, only sorrow and love. Peter ran into the night, weeping like a child, his heart shattered. Inside, the guards laughed and dragged Jesus away. Dawn was breaking, and the light of the world was being led to judgment. The city was awake now, but blind to the miracle standing in chains before them. And as the sky turned pale with morning, the Son of Man stood alone, betrayed, denied, and yet unbroken. The silence between heaven and earth deepened, as if even creation itself waited for what would happen next. Morning broke over Jerusalem, but it was not a peaceful dawn. The sun rose behind clouds stained with smoke and dust, painting the city in gray. The temple bells echoed, and the streets filled with restless feet. In the courtyard of power, Roman soldiers stood like iron statues, and there, at the center of it all, stood Jesus, bound, silent, unresisting. They brought him before Pontius Pilate, the governor of Rome's might in the land of Israel. Pilate was a man used to fear and flattery, not truth. He studied Jesus, the prisoner who didn't look like a rebel, didn't plead for mercy, didn't bow to power. His calmness unsettled even the hardened soldiers. Pilate's voice broke the stillness. "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus looked up, his face bruised but peaceful. "My kingdom is not of this world." The words hung in the air, soft yet thunderous, a truth that didn't need permission to exist. Pilate frowned. He could find no crime in this man, but outside, the voices of priests and crowds began to roar like a storm building beyond the walls. "Crucify him! Crucify him!" The sound rolled like thunder through the courtyard. Pilate's face hardened. Fear whispered in his mind. Fear of the crowd, fear of rebellion, fear of Rome. He turned to the priests. "I find no fault in him," but they pressed harder. "If you let him go, you are no friend of Caesar." The pressure grew heavy, like chains of politics around Pilate's heart. He looked again at Jesus, this man who stood with quiet power, who met cruelty with compassion. Pilate's voice grew weary, almost pleading. "Don't you hear what they say against you?" Jesus remained silent. The governor's wife had sent a message. A trembling servant whispered in his ear, "Do not harm this righteous man. I suffered in a dream because of him." Pilate's hands shook slightly. He wanted to release him, to wash his hands of this madness. But the crowd's roar became a wave, crashing through his will. "Whom do you want me to release? Jesus or Barabbas?" he asked, hoping reason might return to them. The answer came like a dagger. Barabbas! A murderer was set free. The innocent was condemned. Pilate's eyes filled with helplessness. He turned toward a basin of water, washing his hands before the crowd. "I am innocent of this man's blood," he said, but his voice trembled. For no water could cleanse the guilt that was now written on history. Then they placed a crown of thorns upon the head of the true king. The soldiers laughed, pressing the thorns deeper until blood ran down his face. They wrapped him in a faded purple robe, mocking, "Hail, King of the Jews!" Yet even as they mocked, heaven watched in silence, because the man they humiliated was the Savior they could not understand. Pilate handed him over to be crucified. The crowd cheered, believing they had won. But somewhere above the noise, the angels wept, because they knew this was not the end. But the moment love began to bear the world's sin, and as Jesus was led away, the morning light dimmed, as if the sun itself could not bear to see what humanity had chosen. The streets of Jerusalem were alive with noise, yet the sky felt strangely heavy, as if creation itself held its breath. The soldiers led him out through the city gates, and behind them came a wave of voices, mocking, shouting, weeping. The same crowd that once cried, "Hosanna!" now cried, "Crucify him!" Such is the heart of man, quick to praise, quicker to condemn. Upon his shoulders lay a beam of rough wood, splintered and stained. It was heavy, not just with its weight, but with the sins of the world. Every step forward was agony. His back, torn from the scourging, brushed against the coarse timber, reopening wounds with every breath. The crown of thorns pressed deeper, each thorn like a reminder of mankind's cruelty. Blood mixed with sweat, tracing rivers down his face. He stumbled once, then again. The crowd gasped, some with pity, others with cruel delight. A soldier cursed and struck him, forcing him up, but his legs trembled. The creator of the universe now struggling to walk on the very earth he made. A man was pulled from the crowd. Simon of Cyrene, the soldier shouted. The women of Jerusalem wept as he passed. Their cries filled the air like mourning doves. Jesus turned to them, his voice soft but strong. Do not weep for me, but for yourselves and your children. Even in suffering, his heart beat for others. Even as his body broke, his love did not. Dust rose from the path as they reached the hill outside the city. Golgotha, the place of the skull. The crowd followed, curious and cruel, like witnesses to a tragedy they didn't understand. The soldiers prepared the crosses, their laughter sharp and careless. The hammer and nails lay waiting, glinting in the sun. Jesus fell one last time, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. The earth was silent, the air still. A bird cried in the distance, the only sound of mercy in a world that had forgotten its maker. He lifted his face toward heaven, eyes full of pain and peace all at once. He whispered something, perhaps a prayer, perhaps a promise. Then, as the soldiers dragged him toward the waiting cross, a wind rose across the hill, carrying the dust of the world with it. This was no ordinary road. It was the path that would lead all humanity home. And as they stretched him upon the wood, the world stood on the edge of eternity, unaware that love was about to do the impossible. The hill stood silent, carved against the burning sky. 3 crosses rose from the dust like dark scars upon the horizon. Soldiers moved with practiced cruelty. This was routine for them, but not today. Today, the sky itself seemed to hold back its light, as if even the sun refused to watch what was about to happen. They threw him down upon the cross. The wood was rough and cold against his torn skin. A soldier reached for a hammer. Another held a nail. The sound that followed was not just iron striking wood. It was creation crying out. Each blow echoed across eternity. With every strike, love was being nailed into place. The crowd watched. Some mocked. "If you are the Son of God, save yourself," they shouted. Others wept in silence, too broken to speak. Mary stood at the foot of the cross, her hands trembling, her eyes fixed on her son. Every mother's pain was in her heart, but so was every mother's love. She wanted to look away, but love kept her gaze steady. Above him, a sign read, "Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews." The soldiers laughed, but heaven did not, because for once, the earth had spoken truth. He was a king, not one crowned by gold or power, but by thorns and mercy. The hours passed slowly. The sky began to darken, not with night, but with sorrow. The earth groaned, and thunder rolled in the distance. From the cross his voice rose, weak yet steady. "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." The world stopped. Even those who mocked fell silent. Who could speak forgiveness in the middle of agony? Only love could. 2 thieves hung beside him. One cursed, the other believed. "Remember me," the second whispered through his pain. Jesus turned his head, eyes gentle despite the blood and sweat. "Today, you will be with me in paradise." In that moment, even death began to lose its power. The wind grew colder. The earth trembled beneath the hill. He looked up to the heavens, the same sky that once declared, "Let there be light." Now, that light dimmed. My God, why have you forsaken me?" His cry tore through the clouds, shaking heaven itself. Angels bowed their heads. Creation held its breath. And then, with one final breath, he whispered, "It is finished." The sky split with thunder. The temple veil tore in two. The barrier between God and man ripped open forever. Rocks shattered, graves trembled, and soldiers dropped to their knees in fear. One of them looked up at the lifeless body on the cross and whispered, "Truly, this was the Son of God." The world fell silent. The wind stopped. Even the birds refused to sing. And on that hill, between heaven and earth, love hung still, broken, yet victorious. The King had died, but the story was not over. The world grew quiet after the cross. The shouts of the crowd were gone. The soldiers had left. Only the wind remained, whispering through the empty hill of Golgotha. The sky, still bruised from the storm, hung heavy above the earth. It was as if creation itself was mourning. The body of Jesus was taken down, wrapped in linen, and laid in the arms of his mother. Her tears fell onto his face, washing away the blood, mixing sorrow with love. Every breath she took hurt. Every heartbeat reminded her of his absence. Yet even in her pain, she held him gently like she once did when he was a child. Joseph of Arimathea stepped forward, a man of courage in secret. He asked Pilate for the body, not as a ruler or a follower, but as a friend who could no longer stay silent. Alongside him came Nicodemus, carrying spices to honor the dead. Together they walked through the twilight, their steps echoing on the stone path. Every step was a prayer. They reached the garden tomb, new, untouched, waiting. They laid his body inside, sealing it with care. The stone rolled across the entrance with a heavy thud that seemed to echo through eternity. It was finished. Or so they thought. The world fell into silence. The disciples hid in fear, their hearts shattered. Peter sat alone in the shadows, his face buried in his hands, replaying his denial over and over. Mary Magdalene wept outside the tomb until her voice broke. Every word he had spoken, of love, forgiveness, and life, now seemed lost to the coldness of death. The city moved on. The same streets that once echoed with Hosanna now carried only the sound of daily life. To most, the story was over. Another man crucified, another dream buried. But heaven was not silent. Angels stood guard in unseen light, their wings folded, waiting for the command that would change everything. The earth rested, the sky dimmed, and beneath the sealed stone where no eye could see, the impossible was beginning to stir. In the silence of the grave, life was gathering strength. In the darkness, light was preparing to rise. And in the stillness, the heart of heaven began to beat again. The world thought it had witnessed the end, but in truth, it was standing at the doorway of resurrection. It was early morning. The sky was pale, painted with the faint colors of dawn. A quiet stillness covered the garden where the tomb stood. The dew clung to the grass, and the air carried the scent of new life. The stone, that heavy final symbol of death, stood unmoved. The guards at its side watched with weary eyes, never expecting what heaven had prepared. Then the earth began to tremble, not with rage, but with power, the same power that once said, "Let there be light." A light brighter than the sun burst through the cracks of the tomb. The earth shook as if awakening from a long sleep. The soldiers fell to the ground in fear, shielding their faces as the impossible became real. The stone rolled away, not by human hands, but by the breath of God. From the shadows of death stepped the risen King. The burial cloth fell to the ground, empty and still, and where there had been silence, there was now victory. Jesus stood in the garden, the morning light upon his face. The scars remained, reminders of love's price, but his eyes shone with peace deeper than the sea. Life had conquered death. The grave had lost its hold. Mary Magdalene came to the tomb, her heart heavy with sorrow. She saw the stone rolled away and the place empty. Panic filled her voice. "They have taken my Lord, and I don't know where they have laid him." A voice behind her spoke softly, "Mary." She turned, and in that single moment, the world changed forever. Her tears turned to laughter, her sorrow turned to worship. She fell to her knees, whispering through joy and awe, "Rabboni, my teacher." Word spread like fire. The disciples who had hidden in fear now ran with trembling hope. In locked rooms, in lonely hearts, light began to rise again. The one they thought gone forever was alive. He appeared to them, to Thomas who doubted, to Peter who had denied, to those broken by guilt and grief. He stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." His voice carried warmth that healed every wound, every fear, every failure. The cross was not defeat. It was the doorway to victory. The tomb was not the end. It was the womb of new life. As the sun climbed higher over Jerusalem, the world stood reborn. Death had been undone, and love had spoken its final word, forever. And so, The Chosen. Season 6. The Passion of Jesus ends not in sorrow, but in triumph. The story of pain becomes the story of promise. The crown of thorns becomes the crown of glory, and the one who was crucified now reigns eternal. The Savior, the King, the risen Lord. The stone is rolled away, the grave is empty, and hope is alive.